Well, when he was here in Shul over Yontif, I was the Gabbai Rishon, gave him an aliyah, but he wore a mask the whole time.
Okay, so so he was probably doing.
Right. So yesterday he was in Shul, but he did not wear a mask whatsoever.
Okay, so maybe that's progress.
So that may tell you, clarify the situation. Okay. What you see? Hisham? Not yet.
He's usually here on Sunday. I don't know why it's not here.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start as we gather. I'll start the learning sponsors. I just want to mark up my calendar here.
What's today's time?
Lamed Beis.
Lamed Beis is today's.
Bishop Eric,
Okay, yeah.
Again,
Okay.
the guy who listened to last night, Bishop Eric, that was it.
the guy.
Lawrence and Lakewood.
Oh, it wasn't.
No. He listened to somebody. On the
okay,
internet.
Okay. You weren't here. You
No.
did it on your own.
On my cell phone.
I understand.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah.
You went online on your own.
Okay, learning sponsors, a year of learning, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, friends of Leonie Meisman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanel Zundel, friends of Melaskotsky, Moshe Zelig ben Mordechai, Martin Lipman and family in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas, friends of Herb Jeremias, Tzvi ben Zev, friends of Sam Coleman, Shmuel ben Yaakov, friends of Gideon Lazinski, Mordechai, Shlomo ben Meir, Bella and David Adler in memory of her father, Eliyahu ben Yosef Cohen, and those who were inspired by late Rebbitzin Emeritus Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malkabas, and Shalom Yisachar. A month of learning by the friends and students of Rabbi Sholem Kornblum, Rabbi Sholem ben Mordechai, Susan and Ron Podolsky in memory of her father, Simcha Bunam ben Yeshua, Michael and Judith Poretsky in memory of his mother, Rachel Bas Avram. Another donation by Susan and Ronald Podolsky in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Dov, B. Pizer in memory of her father, Yitzchak Dov ben Shmuel. We have a week of learning by Jack Gilman in memory of his brother, Zev Yosef ben Yitzchak, Sharon and Michael Glass, in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Baruch, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his father, Yisur ben Shmuel David, and today's
Marty.
English date, okay, being the 30th of April, right? We have one day of learning by Shalom Sanders in memory of his mother, Chaya Sarah Bat Yitzchak. May Shamas have an aliyah, crank Rafia Velti Shira Shematzliya, L'chol B'nai Israel, a good Gaben Shia. Okay. So as I explained, some of the weekday crowd are not always able to make it the Shabbos afternoon, others vice versa. So I'm just going to pick up real quick from the week. Okay, on the bottom of Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, right? V'ika da Amrei. It's the third line, second line from the bottom. There are those Kol Hecha Da'ata Eid Echad Kasher Me'ikara. So this was an alternative explanation, okay, to Rabbi Nehemiah, okay. Afilu Me'an Hashim Nami Ke'ed Echad Dami. So that was one, but we go over to the top of Lamed Bet, which is today's daf. V'hacha b'mayas kinan. What are we talking about then? Kigon Atai Isha Me'ikara. That's a situation where a woman came initially or originally, earlier. But Tatzela the Rabbi Nehemiah, and Rabbi Nehemiah was then able to interpret it the following way. Hachi Rabbi Nehemiah Omer. This is what Rabbi Nehemiah says. Kol makom shehe'amina Torah Eid Echad halach achar rov deot, wherever really, this is almost like a chasuri mixer of a hachi katani, was how he presented it yesterday. Okay, that in most cases, he says, where we would use an example of going the majority, because we saw there was a problem in terms of what happens if it was two of one versus one of another, two of one kind of testimony versus one of another. Okay, and there was a discussion on that, right? What happens about, so here he's saying, okay, so halach achar rov dayot, va'asu shtei nashim be'isha achad, kishnei anashim be'ish echad. So they said in those cases where it was the same gender, you had 2 versus 1 versus 2 versus 1. They clearly went by the majority. Okay, aval shtei nashim be'ish echad. But when you had a situation where it could be 2 women who are not normally considered valid edim versus 1 man who is considered normally a valid aid. Okay, what about that situation? All right, ki palga upalga dami. Then we consider like that 50-50, half and half, and it's like it would be the equivalent of 1 versus 1. And if the doubt is still there in that case, because of that, she is expected to go through the sota examination and drink. Okay, so what happens? So the Gemara goes on, Vatarte bipsuli edut lamali. And why then did we have to say that these last 2 discussions referred particularly to individuals who are not normally qualified edim? Okay, mahu detema. Why? Because it comes to tell us as follows: ki azlinin batar rov deot, that when we normally would approach a situation and decide based on the majority, the chumrah, that maybe we would only do that when we're talking about astringency. And I don't know if you want to on your own, I would suggest you can look at the art scroll note at that point.
Just that it makes her drink.
Well,
it's a very short note.
Okay, well, but okay, aval lekula lo azlinan, but to be more lenient, okay, and then the question comes up, okay, actually in another note, not so. What do you consider the chumrah here? What do you consider the kula here? Do you consider the chumrah that you make her drink and the question that can die? Or do you consider that the question of not having a drink, is that the chumrah?
It's the kula.
Okay, or is that, it's not that,
Are you saying because now she's forbidden to the husband?
now she's forbidden to that, right? All of that. I didn't bring it up. Art Scroll has it right. Okay? But if that was the case, we wouldn't follow an example of a leniency. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Okay, now we had Drana Lachmi Shakina. Right? So now we get to a new paragraph. Okay. Again, Art Scroll has a lot of notes on each of the different elements that are now going to be mentioned. I'm not going to go into it in detail the way Art Scroll is going into it, but I'll make reference to it. Okay. So what is our essential question here? What language is it that the script, I'll put it that way, or that the text has to follow? Must it be in Hebrew?
When he writes it, it has to be in Hebrew. When he tells it to her,
We'll get to it. Okay. What? Okay. Or does it? Can it be in any language? Okay. So what happens? We know, okay, that this was also a question that applied to Sefer Torah, and not just to these specific items. Yes, I know.
jumping ahead.
Okay, I am. Okay. However, our point here is the fact that while the text clearly needs to be written in the Hebrew, the question is when he informs her, as we're going to see in a moment, okay, of the details of, okay, why she's going through the examination, how to go through the examination, what is the purpose of the examination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's one thing. Then we're going to get to another discussion of, are there texts that must be said in Hebrew? Okay. Okay. Let's go in now to our Mishnah. Elu ne'emarin b'chol lashon. These are examples of items that we find written in the Torah in Hebrew, but when they're presented, okay, in various situations, they can be presented in any language. Okay. 1, Parshat Sota, the section of Sota. Number 2, Vidui Ma'aser. Okay, we're talking about here, a testimony, witness testimony.
You take place.
Okay, right? So the witness testimony here is often in cases of monetary. Okay, so next, Kriyat Shema. That Shema should be able to be recited in any language. Next, Utfilah. The Amida should be able to be recited in any language. Okay. Next, Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals. Okay. Next, Ushavuat Ha'edut. Okay. Again, another kind of vow, all right, testimony in regards to a situation where if someone knows that they could give testimony, particularly in a financial case, and they're refraining from doing so, you can force that person to do a shvuah in this case.
That he didn't know anything.
Okay, claiming that he didn't. Ushvuat hapikadon. There we're saying a vow that a person is denying possession of a particular item. Okay? Ve'elu nemarim b'lashon hakodesh. And the following are items that are required to be said in Hebrew. Okay? 1, Mikra Bikurim, the declaration regarding first fruits. Right? V'chalitza, declaration regarding the whole script of what goes on when the Yavam refuses to do Yibum and is doing Chalitza. Okay, what she has to say, what he has to say, things like that. Okay? Next, Brachot uklalot, those blessings and curses when we're referring to Mount Ival and Mount Gerizim. Okay? Next, Birkat Kohanim. Okay, Kohanim, priestly blessing, right? Next, Birkat Kohen Gadol. This is an example of what the Kohen Gadol says in Yom Kippur. Okay.
When it comes out.
Okay, when he comes out of being in the right?
Country.
Kadoshim, right? Next, Uparshat Hamelech. This refers to the example of Hakel. Okay, that the king, when he reads the Torah on Sukkot, okay, at the end of Shemitah year, okay, that he must recite it in Hebrew. Okay, Uparashat Egla Arufa, the section dealing with the slaughtering of the calf, there when there's a question of the dead body between two locations. Umashuach milchama b'sha'a shemedaber el ha'am. Mashuach milchama, remember, is the Kohen who is what we'll call for the moment the chief chaplain. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Okay, and he directs his certain remarks to the troops before going out to war. Okay, remember that talked about in the Torah, whether if you're going to be nervous, if you're recently married, all sorts of what's valid and what's not. Okay, right. So now the Gemara is going to go through each example that we've now said,
except which is understood.
Which, except
The
for what?
brachas and the klalos.
No, it goes into that.
No, it goes into how it's done. It doesn't prove it's Hebrew.
Well,
because
we'll see.
Either way, if it has to be a language they understand or it has to be Hebrew, they all understood Hebrew. So it would have to have been Hebrew either way.
I'm not prepared to make that assumption. Okay. All right. Anyway, so the point we're now going to get is we're going to look at each of the examples individually as to why it must be said in Hebrew. And in doing so, we're going to try to find a pasuk or a rabbinic exposition, a drasha that bases it and gives us that information. Okay. All right. First example, Mikra Bikurim. We said that's the declaration of first fruits. Right. Ketzad. On what basis is that it has to be in Hebrew? Va'anita va'amarta lifnei Hashem Eloheh. Okay, that the Torah text specifically says, okay, you answer and you say before Hashem. Okay, that's the point. Ulahalan hu omer, and then further on it says va'anu halavim va'amru, that the Leviim answered and they said.
And that's by the
Okay.
brachas and chol.
Okay, so that's an example of what happened at Harival and Hagrizim. All right. So in other words, since it was before Hashem, that there was a response and answer, what happens? Ma lahalan b'lashon hakodesh, afkan b'lashon hakodesh. So since there it is done in Hebrew, here too it must be done in Hebrew. What about the next example? Chalitza. Ketzad. What was the example there? Va'anta va'amra. Almost similar language. She answers and she says. Okay, ulahalan hu omer, and further on, then it said again, vanu halaviim amru. Okay, we have that again, that parallel, notice the language, parallel between answering and saying. Okay, so if somebody is saying it one language, the response has to be in a similar language. That's the implication, right? So what happens? Well, because it says Vanu Halavim B'Amru, Malahalan B'Lashon HaKodesh, the same way there it is in Hebrew, Afkan B'Lashon HaKodesh. So here too it's in Hebrew. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda is going to darshan it a little differently. Okay, Va'anta Va'amra Kacha. Okay, notice he's using the same, almost the same, because it's got the double lashon ana. Yeah, we'll get to that same. Even though it has both answering and saying, that's not what's going to be the ikar for his drasha. The ikar is going to be kachan, thus. Okay, this is how you do, right? What? Ad shetomar b'lashon hazeh, implying until you say it in that same format, in that kind of language. Okay, now we get into the example. Since we've cited at least twice, okay, the business with Va'anu Halaviim Va'amru, okay, that leads us to the blessings and curses associated with Hareval and Hagrizim. Okay, Ketzad, what went on there? Okay, so now we're going to get a little agadata here. Okay, Kevan, what?
Person who is deaf. Okay, so who was completely deaf. And the problem of chalitza, how would they resolve that?
If the woman is deaf, or they are they?
She was able to read your lips. And she spoke sometimes, it came out not fluent, but it was in that situation.
I would assume that they would find a way to deal with it.
If she can't speak, she can't do it.
Well, that's if she can't speak, but we
Right,
can't.
If she can't
but-
hear, she can still do it.
If she,
I didn't hear what he said
okay.
either.
The point is, okay. If the issue is as follows: if you're deaf, can you speak? Right? If she could read lips, okay,
Then she presumably can.
then she would be able to speak and say it.
But she would, but it came out not, I don't know, whatever it is.
So she speaks with an accent. It's not a
Shit,
problem.
it's not.
Yeah, she spoke with an English accent, very good.
Okay, no, the implication is, okay. I'll answer you this way.
In other words, let's assume she couldn't read lips. She was deaf. How does she perform chalitza?
She
They
can't.
write it out for her.
If she can't speak or hear,
Okay. If
then
she-
she's a charisha.
Charisha.
I don't know the feminine, and she can't have gotten married in the first place.
How do you know? But when she wrote, they wrote it out for her. Can she read? Yes.
Then she's not deaf and dumb. You just said she's both deaf and dumb.
No, I didn't say that. You said that. I
Okay.
said she was deaf. I didn't say
Okay,
the word
if
dumb.
she's able to read lips, okay, that's one thing.
All right, let's
Okay,
go
if
back.
not, that's another issue.
Go back and.
Most
learn your
people, by the
vowels.
way, I'm familiar from years ago, there was an institute in Hartford, Connecticut. By the way, I knew somebody who was a teacher there, where it was a special institute for the deaf, where they specifically taught them.
It still exists.
Like, it's still there.
I don't know if it's still there, but it still exists.
Right. And in other words, it was years ago that I was familiar with it. I didn't know whether the institution, the school was still in operation. That's the point. But it was an outstanding place where they sent young people who were deaf to teach them how to read lips and how to speak and things like that. Okay. All right. Anyway, brachot uklalot ketzad. Okay, blessings and curses. What are we dealing with here? Kevan she'avru Yisrael et hayarden. Once the Jewish people crossed the Jordan, uba'u el har Grizim v'el har Eval, and they reached the point of Mount Grizim and Mount Ebal, right? Shebeshomron, that's in the Shomron area. Shebetzad Shechem, that's near the city of Shechem. Shebe'etzel Elonei Moreh, that is not far from the terebinths of Moreh. Okay, that's what it kind of tree it is.
The
Okay,
name of the town.
all right, Elonei Moreh. Okay, you actually, if you go on certain tours, by the way, today, you actually can go to that location, all right? And they will show you the two mountains and the proximity to Shechem and the proximity to,
Shechem and Elonei
to
Mamre,
Hebron.
according to this Mishnah, the same place.
Okay, well, we'll get to it in a second. Okay, so the point is, all right, all right, so what happens? Shnei Amar, why? Because it says, Hello, Hema, ve'eva hayarden v'gomer, that they are on the other side of the Jordan, etc. Ulahalan hu omer, and further on it says, V'yavor Avram ba'aretz ad makom Shechem ad Elon Moreh. So the implication of the Pasukim is that Shechem and Elon Moreh are more or less the same location. Okay, and in physical, actually, they're the same general vicinity, but not the very
But that's
same.
now. That did not have been by
Okay. Ma Elon Moreh ha'amur lahalan Shechem, af Elon Moreh ha'amur kan Shechem. Okay. Now the story goes on. Shisha shvatim alu l'rosh har Gerizim. 6 tribes went up to the top of Mount Gerizim. V'shisha shvatim alu l'rosh har Eval, and 6 other tribes went to the top of Har Eval. V'hakohanim v'leviim v'ha'aron, down in the valley in between, were the Kohanim, Levim, and the Aaron. Omdim lamata be'emtz. Right? They were in the middle below. HaKohanim akifim et ha'aron. Kohanim were gathered in a circle around the Aaron. The Leviim, okay, and the Badrivim at the Kohanim. And the Leviim were an outer circle further around the Kohanim. Okay? V'chol Yisrael mikan u'mikan. And the rest of the people on each side of the mountain.
one or the other.
Okay, Shnei Amar, as it says, V'chol Yisrael u'zikenav v'shotrav v'shoftav omdim mizeh u'mizeh la'aron v'gumeh. Okay, so they were on either side, right? The elders, the young, the watch, everybody.
We're on the bottom.
Okay, hafchu pneihem klapei har Grizim. They would turn and face towards Har Grizim. Upatchu bebracha, and they would recite bracha. Baruch ha'ish asher lo ya'aseh pesel u'masecha. Okay, so that was an example. Okay,
That's the first one.
okay, one that's starting with that statement series. Okay, that blessed is person who does not make any kind of idol or mold or image. Okay, ve'elu onim amen, and these would answer amen. Hafchu pneihem klapei har Eval. Then they turned and they faced the other mountain. Okay, upatchu b'klala. They began with the first curse. Arur ha'ish asher ya'aseh pesel u'masecha. Cursed be the person. Okay, in that situation. Ve'elu onin amen. And these then would answer amen. Ad shegomrim brachot uklalot, until they finished all the blessings and the curses. V'char kach heviu et ha'avanim, and then afterwards they brought certain rocks,
Two
stones.
two large planks of stone.
I'm not sure if it was only two. Okay.
Two.
Uvanu et hamizbeach, and they built an altar. V'saduhu b'sid, and they covered it with, I guess, lime in a sense. V'kadvu alav et kol divrei haTorah v'shivim lashon, and they wrote the entire Torah, okay, right, in 70 languages. Shenama be'er heitei, okay, as we say that it's very in clear and specific language.
Meaning anybody who came
Okay.
could understand.
V'natlu et ha'avanim uba'u, okay, and then they placed the stones and they went, as we go to the next Amud, all right, v'lanu b'mkoman, and they went and then they spent the night, overnight in that location. Okay, okay, now we're on Amud Beis with the Gemara, right? So what happens? Very first question comes back to the beginning. We said that the Sota section could be recited in any language. She could be told it in any language, okay, or by the Kohen, okay. In theory, I think it's our school that even suggests he could say it to her in Hebrew and they could have somebody translate it to her into another language.
The point is she has to understand.
Okay.
what's happening.
Right? Parshat Sotaminala. But what's the basis, says the Gemara, okay, that's we're asking that we can see that this is it's permissible to do that. Okay, dichtiv, because it's written. I didn't get a chance to hear that you sent me.
But
Okay, dichtiv, why it's written. Ve'amar hakohen leisha. Okay, and the Kohen says to a woman, bechol lashon shahu omer, any language that one is able to hear. Okay, in other words, you have to be able to comprehend. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, and we learn a bright. Mashmi'in ota b'chol lashon shehi shoma'at. We make her hear in any language that she is capable of hearing, and we're going to fill in here and understand. Okay, Almahu shota. What is the reason why she is being made to drink? Ubamahi shota. In what is she drinking? What's the
from what
utensil?
container?
Utensil, right? Next, alma nitma'et. What are the circumstances that and by which she became defiled? Ubamahu nitma'et. And what are the conditions? Okay, were such that she became defiled. Almahu hi shota. Okay, why are we saying that she is forced to drink? Al iske kinui ustira. And regarding the warning and the seclusion. Ubamahi shota. And in what utensil is it that she drinks? Right? B'mekeda shel cheres. It is a particular kind of earthenware container. Art Scroll called it a fire pot.
It has lamp black on it, so
Okay,
it's ugly.
it's the implication is that it is a ugly, or dirty, etc., container.
This implies you can hear, but you can't read.
What are we calling?
It doesn't say that. It says she has to hear what. it
Right,
says.
we don't know that.
So, but in other words, it's telling me if you write it down, it doesn't count.
Correct.
He
Correct.
can't give it to her in a written form.
But there's witnesses there with her to show her
What is
so she can understand. And you're telling me no.
I'm saying that when the Kohen does the examination, he does not give it to her in written form. That's what I'm telling you. Okay,
And he must use her language. He can't use an intermediary.
Right.
Because they're too
I
pseudo.
think this went back to sentences. The Kohen speaks in any language that he speaks.
No. He must,
he
there are
speaks.
two
That he
psukim.
speaks. What it says. But then there's more explanation about it. But he speaks, but somebody else has to translate it.
No, that would not work. There are two psukim. One says she has to understand it. So that means it has to be said in a language that she
She
comprehends.
understands.
The other pasuk gives him permission to say it in any language. So he must say it in a language she understands.
understand.
He can't use an intermediary.
Uh,
So they would perhaps,
Look what,
I'm just
look what the
guessing,
art, look what the art,
transliterate for him so he can use her language.
look what the art scroll says.
Our scroll says exactly what I just said. I just read it.
Read it again.
According to either reading, a verse is required to teach the Kohen does not have to use Hebrew.
Right.
Okay? If after the Kohen adjures her in Hebrew, an interpreter translates the words, that would not count. Hence, it was necessary for the Torah to teach that the Kohen himself should speak in her language.
The language that she understands.
Correct.
That's
And
the,
not a Mitargum.
okay, so B'Makeda Shel Cheres. Aman it mate, what was the, under the conditions that she became defiled? Al Iskes Chok V'Yaldut, behavior that's reflecting levity or immaturity. Okay? Ubamahi nitmate, and what were the conditions under which she became defiled? Bishogeg obamezid, was it by accident or on purpose? Ba'onis or baratzon, was it forced or was it willingly?
And
Okay.
if it's two, if it's
So-
the first two of each of it, then she's off the hook.
Well, the point is, if it was
Shogeg or
if it was
force,
shogeg, or if it was
then
forced,
she's off the
okay,
hook.
the implication is that she did not do it willingly, and therefore there's no reason for her to have to drink. Okay, all right. So what happens? The kol kach lama. Why is that all of that? Why do we go through this whole, so to speak, script, rigmarole, etc.? Shelo lahotzi la'az al mayim hamolim, so that people will not mock, I'll use that word, the entire process of the sota examination and the water. Okay. Now, vidui ma'aser, we get to the next example. Okay, with the following: Minalam, on what basis do we say that a testimony regarding the tithes? Okay,
Is any
all
like-
right. With dichtiv, because it says va'amarta lefnei Hashem Elohecha bi'arti hakodesh min habayit. Okay, so that's the part of the pasuk that I say before Hashem. What is it we do? V'yalif amira misota, and we learn gzera shava from the words, based on the words amar or amira. Okay, speaking from the sota. Bechol lashon shahu omer. Okay, again, in any language that he's capable of speaking. Amar le Rav Zavid la'abai, and he's going to question. V'leilif amira milevim. Why are we learning it from sota? He asks. Wouldn't it be better to go back and learn it as we did other examples? Okay, from the response of the Levim at Har Eval and Har Grizim, where there the language is v'amarta v'anita. You say and you respond. So the response has got to be in the same language as what the initial statement was. All right, but the Gemara is going to be very specific now in this exposition. Okay, based on his question. Malahalan b'lashon hakodesh. The same way there it was initially. In other words, they announced the blessing or the curse in Hebrew. Afkan b'lashon hakodesh.
That's the question.
Okay, so here too it should be in the language. Danin amira greda me amira gredata. Okay, we make our gezerah shava based on the word saying by itself from another case, another example of a pasuk where it talks about saying by itself. Ve'en danin amira gredata me aniyah va'amira. But we do not make our gezerah shava from an example where we say the word saying by itself to another pasuk where it talks about answering and saying. Okay, that's the exposition. Tanya, and we have a bright. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, he says as follows: Adam Omer Shivcho b'kol namuch. Okay, a person should say his own praise in a quiet or low voice, right? Ugenuto b'kol ram, but any sort of negative aspects about himself,
Shout
okay,
from the roof.
it should make it allow. Okay, shivcho b'kol namuk, says the Gemara. Okay, his praise should be in a low voice. Min vidui hamaaser. Okay, are we talking then the example of this testimony regarding the tithes? Gnuto b'kol ram. Okay, his bad characteristics. Okay, in a loud voice. Mimikra b'kurim.
It starts out, my father was an Arab.
Okay, are we talking there about the first fruits? If we look in the Torah, okay, and we all remember we just went through Pesach, okay, we have that same section from the text, Arami Oved Ovi, etc., 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 and the
It says
Haggadah,
there that he was
reworks
saying
it.
about his Zorin.
yeah, right? Well,
That's what the Gnai part.
right, it's connected back to what it says earlier, okay, and also from the Genut Lashva, right? Genuto b'koram mimikra b'kurim. We would learn that from the example of the textual section regarding first fruits. So the Gemara asks, Ugenuto b'kol ram? You really think it's appropriate for a person to talk about their negative characteristics in a loud voice? V'ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Mipnei ma taknu tefillah b'lachash? On what was the basis? Then that they established that recitation of the Amida should be done silently. Kadei shelo levayesh et ovrei avera, so that there should be no embarrassment on the part of those who have committed sin, because as part of the Amida, they're going to confess their sins. Okay? What happens? Shaharei lo chilek hakatuv makom bein chatat leolah. Why? Because we see that in terms of where one would bring various kinds of offerings, like a chatat, which was for a sin, or olah, okay, they were to be brought and offered in the very same location, so people would not know, okay,
Slaughtering
that
in the north.
that the killing of the animal was done for the purpose of a chatas, as opposed to the purpose of an oath. Okay, Gemara. Oh,
We'll get
the
there.
Gemara, good, you're right. Baruch Shekivanta, Marty. The Gemara is going to raise that question. Okay, very
He's
good.
not there. He's
Okay.
there for the shchita because he has to do
Okay,
the smicha,
what happens?
but the kohen is all by himself.
Right, lo tema genuto. Let's not say that a person's bad aspects should be recited aloud. Ela, excuse me, ema sa'arato, sa'aro. But instead, we'll say when a person has sorrows, when he has problems, troubles,
That's what it
woes,
says a lot.
okay, that should be said aloud, right? Kedetanya, as we learn elsewhere in a Braita, the following: V'tamei tamei yikra. When we know it's a situation of a mitzora, okay, as he's going, he must call out, okay, and to make aloud, designating and warning people about his condition. Tzrich lahodia tzaro l'rabim. He must warn the majority of people about his affliction. V'rabim mivakshim alav rachamim. And as a result, the response of people should be that they should pray on his behalf for his well-being. V'chomi she'ira bo davar, and anything where something, we assume that Gemara means negative, has occurred to a person, tzrich lahodia l'rabim, he should make it known to the community, right, to the majority. V'rabim mevakshim alav rachamim, and the majority will pray for mercy upon him. Okay, we go on now. Gufa, we come back to the earlier citation that we had before. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, excuse me, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the following. Mipnei ma tiknu tefillah b'lachash. Okay. Notice, by the way, that this is really the second example that we've had within this week or the last few days dealing with prayer approaches, prayer material as well. Okay, right. So what happens? Okay, mipnei ma tiknu tefillah b'lachash shelo levayesh et ovrei avera. Okay, that he cited in order not to embarrass those who may commit sins, because during the Amida we said they would be confessing their sins. Shaharei lo chalak hakatuv makom bein chatat laolah, because the Torah did not distinguish, okay, the location of where the chatas and the olah were brought. Okay, now what happens? Velo, if it made no distinction, asks the Gemara. Here, Marty, we're going to get to your example, right? Baha ikadamim. But what about how the blood is spilled or spritzed or however? Okay, dam chatat lemala. The blood of a chatat is put on top. Okay, v'dam olah lemata, and the blood from an olah is below. Okay, hatam kohen hu diadam. There, the person doing that is the kohen, and he's the only one who therefore recognizes that distinction between the two.
Or at least, even though everybody can see it, they don't know whose chatas it is,
That could
because
be.
he's back there by the gate.
Right. V'ha'ika chatat nekeva. But wait a second, we've got another example. What about the kind of animal that's brought? Okay, but with regards to a chatat, it has to be a female. Olah zachar, and the olah has to be a male animal. Okay, what's our answer there? Hatam michsaya ba'alya. There it is the tail of the animal that covers the genitalia, and therefore you won't know. Okay, Corin, by the way, actually has a picture, okay, there in the notes, okay, to show how it's possible that the tail of the animal could actually cover.
But that's only on a sheep.
Okay, we're going to get to that, right? All right, so what happens? Tenach b'kivsa. Fine, says the Gemara. That may apply to a keves, to a sheep. Se'ira, what about a goat? My ikala meimar, what are you going to say then? Hatam ihu dekam michsaf nafshe. There, says the Gemara,
It's the bring,
right? The point is,
the bringer's own fault.
okay, that is the situation where the one, okay, who is bringing the offering has brought it on himself.
Because he could have used the sheep.
The Abayale, because we could have said le'etuye kivsa, that it's possible that instead he could have brought the sheep. V'kamaite se'ira, and instead what happens is he brought the goat. Okay, chatat de ovadat kochavim. What about the one who brings a chatas offering for having committed an act of
Which must
avodah
be a goat.
zarah? What about that situation? Delo sage delo sira, where it's not sufficient or appropriate to bring anything other than a goat. My ikala meimar, what are you going to say there? Hatam nichsaf nizil. Okay, there. Okay, what happens there? He comes and he brings it. In other words, we want him to have embarrassment in a sense. Why? Right? Ki hechi de nichpar le. Why? Because it really encourages the person
Not
to make
do it again.
atonement and never to be involved in avodah zarah any further. Okay, what happens? Now we get to another example with davening, with liturgy. Kriyat Shema minalan. Okay, what about Kriyat Shema? Dichtiv, as it says, Shema Yisrael, that the people can't hear. B'chol lashon shata shomea. In any language you are able to. Tanu
Can you
Rabbanan.
understand?
Okay, well, hold on. Tanu Rabbanan says a braita. Kriyat Shema kichtava. Okay, we have a braita though that says that Kriyat Shema ought to be recited the way it's written, Divrei Rebbe. That's the view of Rebbe. Chachamim omrim. However, the sages say, excuse me, b'chol lashon, in any language. So now we challenge, why is Rebbe's view that it should be recited clearly in Hebrew? Okay, my Talmud the Rebbe, what's Rebbe's reasoning? Amar Kra, says the pasuk, vehayu. Clearly it says vahayu hadvarim ha'ela. Okay, that's part of the text, right? Vahavyasan Yehu. The way they exist, in other words, the way they are almost printed, that's how Rebbe holds they should be recited. Okay? The Rabbanan, Art School again goes into a long note here. The Rabbanan and the rabbis, Amakra Shma. The verse says here,
Comprehend.
right? Bechol lashon shata shomea, in any language that you are able to hear and understand. Okay? The Rabbanan, and regarding the rabbis, Nami hakativ v'hayu. Isn't it also written that they have the understand the text says v'hayu, and it should be as follows: Hahu shelo yikrena lemafreya. They understand that to mean that you have to read it in the appropriate order and not out of sequence.
Skip around.
Okay, the Rebbe, and as far as Rebbe goes, what about his view? Shelo yikrena lemafreya minale. That Rebbe also holds that one cannot read it out of sequence. Well, on what does he base it? Right? Nafkale midvarim ha dvarim. He bases it on a drush of the fact that the words in the text of the Torah says vayu hadvarim ha'ele. Okay, and he darshans the hey here to understand it that that's the case. It must be these or the words said in the appropriate order. Okay, the Rabbanan and the rabbis, dvarim hadvarim, regarding that drasha, lo mashma lahom. They don't learn it. They don't derive that example. The Rebbe nami haktiv. But what about the fact that for Rebbe also it says shama hahu mibayele lahashmiya laaznecha masha tamotziv mipika. But what about the fact when it says to hear? Okay, we learn that it comes to tell us that you must recite it to your ears loud enough, right?
For you to hear yourself.
For you to hear oneself. Okay,
That's Rebbe's opinion.
okay, when you recite it yourself, not for your neighbor. Okay, the Rabbanan and the rabbis, Savre la kimanda amar hakorei et shma, velo hishmiya la azno yatsa. But the rabbis hold that one who recites Shema, okay, and even if they don't say it loud enough to hear it in their own ears, is still fulfilled the obligation.
By the way, Rabbi Yehuda thinks that you have to say it loud enough for the guy sitting next to you to hear.
Yeah, but we don't
And that's
paskin
brought
like
in
that.
Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, but we don't paskin like that.
But it's a yesh omrim in Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, but that you don't paskin like it. though. That's the point. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to stop right there and we'll pick up tomorrow at the very bottom.
I'll go early.
You didn't hear him.
Thank you.
That's cute.
Okay, and we'll
Scrap.
continue there.
Now, when are you not going to be around next
Okay.
Tuesday?
No, I'm going to ask that you and Ruvain handle Monday and Tuesday
Okay, I'll do.
of next month.
Okay. Okay, maybe he'll do Tuesday.
Because Monday is the day the movers come.
Whatever, you don't have to explain. You just
No,
have to
I
make
guess, thank
sure
you.
that I know when.
Yeah,
Okay, Monday and Tuesday next week.
all right, and
Very
so,
good.
just in case.
And
If I feel like I have no idea that I'm
fine,
going to be able
Tuesday is Lag BaOmer.
By the way, Lag BaOmer, we will not be in this room.
Why not?
Why? Because they're going to be using this room to sign the ksuba. There's a wedding that day. here in
Oh,
Shul.
yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, so this will be the Chussen's Tish?
I don't know if it's a Chussen's
So
Tish,
that's where you sign your suit?
but this is what, that's what's going to be.
It's gonna be that early?
That's a separate discussion we'll have.
Are you, we were invited to this thing. Are you going?
We were invited to the chuppah.
I don't know what I was, I
Who's
think
getting
we were
married?
invited to the whole shebang, but I don't know.
Kelly, who's getting married?
It's that lady. No, What's her name? Robin.
Robin Lerner's getting married.
You know, after like 25 years of not having a spouse. She- And when they came to us for a Sauda.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful fellow.
He's a
He's